Thank you. Let's start because we have only 1 hour. Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Meike, for being with us remotely. We have not a big audience, but here are the good ones. More people are coming. But as we only have 1 hour and we have a lot to talk about, I would like to start. First, thank you to all of you. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you, Ram, Philip, Meike, Chris, and those of you who are here with us. And this space to talk and exchange some ideas about cybersecurity and cyber defense in developing economies. We have some issues here. So I would like first to start presenting our distinguished panelists. We have Mr. Jose Cepeda. He's European parliamentarian. He's from Spain. We have Marique Keo. She's from remote. She's CISO and board member from a technical advisor. Hi, Marique. We have Ram Mohan here with us. He's Chief Strategy Officer and of Identity Digital, and he was former ICANN board member. We have Chris Painter, our dear friend Chris from remote from the United States. He is the director of Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, and Chris was the first cyber diplomat in the world, so he's very well known for that. We have Professor Wolfgang Kleinwächter, also a very good friend of us, Professor Emeritus of University of Aarhus and former Commissioner of the Global Commission of Stability and Cyberspace, GCSC. And we have our dear friend Philip Grabensen from Germany. He is the Defense Council and former chairman of Affiliates, which is a company devoted to DNS services and internet services. So thank you all for being with us. And I would like to start from a statement from Jose Cepeda from the European Parliament. Jose will make some remarks in Spanish and I will translate into English. But if you want to practice your Spanish, it's a good moment to listen to Jose. Jose, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's okay? Well, okay. Well, thank you, Olga. Thank you for your invitation about this panel. It's very important for Europe, for the Parliament from Europe, to debates about cybersecurity and cyber defense. But we say it is very important to speak in Spanish to Latin America area. It's very important for us. Yes. Yo quiero hablar un poco también en español, sobre todo para esa área tan importante del mundo, que es América, con nuestros colegas, además, que están haciendo una inmensa labor, un gran trabajo en los últimos años para impulsar la política de ciberseguridad y la política de ciberdefensa en todos sus países. Desde el Parlamento Europeo, la introducción, lo que quería aportar es un poco el trabajo de proyección que estamos haciendo, un trabajo prospectivo, en un contexto mundial muy complejo, basado en múltiples conflictos militares también que estamos teniendo en la frontera de Europa con Ucrania, por ejemplo, todo Oriente Medio, que nos está haciendo a Europa tomar conciencia de la importancia de las previsiones futuras y hacia dónde tenemos también que orientar nuestras políticas de ciberseguridad para protegernos, ¿no? En ese sentido, me gustaría compartir con todos los colegas el trabajo que está orientándose hacia las ciberamenazas híbridas, ¿no? Pasando, por un lado, muy importante desde los ataques multicanal, que los denominamos así, que son al final los famosos actores estatales patrocinados, ¿no? Por estados que están trabajando de una forma directa, de una forma múltiple. Primero generan estructuras de desinformación y por otro lado lo que hacen es difundirlas para de esta forma hacer desequilibrar también a los países de alguna forma o de alguna manera, ¿no? Desde luego nosotros estamos trabajando en ese análisis. Estamos también hablando de la ciberdefensa técnica, que es un elemento muy importante donde la inteligencia artificial está abriendo un nuevo camino, digamos, para los malos, y lo que tenemos que hacer también desde el ámbito de la defensa es trabajar para protegernos, ¿no? Generando ciberescudos basados también en inteligencia artificial que hagan previsiones de posibles ciberataques y sobre todo estructuras de mucho nivel para, digamos, responder en tiempo real. Quiero decir que la inteligencia artificial como tecnología no se va a poner al servicio de los malos solo, sino que también todas las estructuras europeas, por ejemplo, están trabajando ya en esa dirección y en ese sentido, ¿no? Hay un elemento muy importante también que está ligado a lo que es el espionaje masivo dirigido. Estoy hablando de plataformas críticas basadas en la red satelital, comunicaciones encriptadas, centros de procesos de datos, que por ejemplo, según la Agencia Europea de Ciberseguridad, ENISA, van a utilizar métodos donde el uso de malware masivo, avanzado, sigiloso, profundo, por ejemplo, utilizando las técnicas de infiltración en firmware, van a ser muy habituales. A mí personalmente me preocupa mucho la capacitación de los países en el ámbito de ponerse a la vanguardia, por ejemplo, también en computación cuántica, ¿no? Que eso es una cuestión que vamos muy por detrás. Quiero decir, hay muchas empresas privadas que lo tienen y, sin embargo, hay muchos gobiernos que no lo tienen, porque hace falta grandes inversiones y eso es una de las cuestiones también muy importantes en las que vamos a trabajar. Otra de las previsiones para el año que viene está basada también en la automatización de los ciberataques en torno al malware polifórmico, ¿no? Basado en inteligencia artificial con código malicioso mutante, es decir, código que se inserta en las estructuras, en infraestructuras críticas y que posiblemente gracias a la tecnología basada en inteligencia artificial va mutando según se va desarrollando, digamos, posibles estructuras de ciberdefensa, en este caso, ¿no? Por parte de las instituciones o de los gobiernos, ¿no? Eso va a ser muy complicado, pero precisamente por eso es muy importante también conocerlo cómo va a evolucionar los próximos años, ¿no? Respecto a los ciberataques autónomos, hablar de los sistemas botnet, ataques distribuidos basados en DD2, por ejemplo, sin lugar a dudas van a alcanzar nuevas escalas, ¿no? Al ser programados y adaptarse precisamente dinámicamente en base a tecnologías basadas en inteligencia artificial. Perfecto. Muy bien, muy bien.
So thank you, Jose. I will translate. So Jose is explaining us all the preventions and activities that they are doing about cybersecurity and cyber defense forecast for 2025. So first, he spoke about the escalation of hybrid threats based on integrated multi-channel attacks from state and state-sponsored state actors that combine cyber attacks with disinformation, digital sabotage, and kinetic activities. As an example, he explained the manipulation of ICS networks to dispute power, followed by disinformation campaigns to maximize social impact. Then he explained us about the technical cyber defense, about early detection systems with machine learning algorithms that will be necessary to identify patterns in these hybrid actions. And then he explains about targeted mass espionage. Critical platforms such as satellites, encrypted communications, and distributed data centers will be prime targets. According to ENISA, what is ENISA? Que es la agencia europea, it's the European Cybersecurity Agency. Methods will include the use of advanced deep stealth malware and firmware infiltration techniques. Then he explained to us the automation of cyber attacks and based threats and artificial intelligence based threats, not only artificial intelligence used by bad actors, also for good actors. Polyformic malware with artificial intelligence. Attackers will use artificial intelligence to generate malicious code in real time that evades traditional detection solutions. This type of malware will be especially problematic for environments that are not updated or do not implement artificial intelligence-based adaptive systems. Then he explained to us about autonomous cyber attacks. about botnets, systems and distributed attacks such as the denial of service will reach new scales by being programmed to dynamically adapt to defense responses. And then finally, he explained about technical cyber defense, CM, security information and event management, and SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response platforms will be essential for managing automated responses. All these are issues about the cybersecurity and cyber defense forecast that they are preparing for the next year. ¿Te parece que hagamos una ronda de comentarios y después seguís? Okay. I would suggest after this very interesting comments that Jose made about the forecast for cyber defense in 2025, I would like to um, go to the questions to our dear panelists. Allow me to find my script. So, Marike, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, Olga. Yes. Can you all hear me?
Now I can hear you because I have to wear my earphones. Marike, you're an experienced CISO, so you're a woman devoted to cybersecurity. And based on your experience, which are the skills that a CISO must have, especially in a developing country, to deal with challenges that developing economies usually face in relation with cybersecurity and cyber defense? And also, after what Jose shared with us, which is the threats that are forecast as they see that for the next year. And welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. Being a chief information officer is a position that has evolved over the years, and it can mean different things to different people. However, to me, the role has always meant that you are the person responsible for developing and implementing the strategy to provide resilience and trustworthiness in our digital environments. And in developing countries, where sometimes they are still evolving to create effective regulation and also national cybersecurity laws, you are most often also a stakeholder and should be in the room to be a voice, and especially so if you're a CISO in critical infrastructure. So I'm going to list three primary skills. One of them is that you absolutely must have critical and strategic thinking. And part of that is because in developing economies, you're often faced with challenges that include lack of resources. And it's not always financial. There's really, I think, the biggest challenge is a skills gap where you just don't know or you don't have the people that can help with overall cybersecurity goals. And this lack of resources and effective team means that sometimes the CISO has to be the security architect, the security operations team, the security operations center, the incident response team, and the threat intelligence team, right? They have to do everything while they're trying to prioritize what needs to be done and how do you actually get it done. So by utilizing strategic thinking, a CISO in developing economies can determine when to outsource and which tasks need to be prioritized. So most developing nations or companies that provide cybersecurity help will have usually a list of the top 5 or 10 items to do, and they think, oh, that's not so much. Well, in many developing economies and with the lack of resources, you might only be able to one or at most 2 of these items. So which ones do you choose? And when outsourcing, it is extremely important to be strategic and ensure that capacity building training is included so that developing economies can build internal knowledge and expertise to provide for future opportunities within their own countries. It can also be beneficial because sometimes in developing countries, there are language constraints. So being able to communicate in your own language. The second skill is having effective communication skills, because you must be able to communicate critical risks that are relevant to your organization, industry, or nation state. And as I previously mentioned, you are a stakeholder typically in perhaps developing legal constructs and also regulations within your developing country. And effective communication can also help build trust and collaboration, which is what brings me to the third extremely important skill of being able to promote collaboration and information sharing. This is absolutely critical in developing economies. We all learn from each other. I've had the privilege to work in a very global environment. And I know that the Pacific Island nation states, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, the Balkans, I mean, there are many, many information sharing groups that are region specific. And this very much helps developing economies because within a region, you usually have different levels of maturity when it comes to cybersecurity, either defense or understanding or skills. And so it's not even that you just build up sharing groups within your own sector, being financial or healthcare or what have you, but sometimes also you have similar issues based on geographic region. So that information sharing and collaboration as to which threats you're most vulnerable to, right? What is actually happening in your region is extremely important. And also what is critical regarding collaboration is that you must know who to escalate when, as a CISO, when you see that there's nation state relevant information that is specific and that can target your specific nation state or region. So to sum it up, I think the three skills that are really important are one, critical and strategic thinking, two, effective communication, which means with the technical sector, with policy makers and regulators, and also three, which is extremely important to me, is promoting collaboration and information sharing. So thank you for that, for giving me a chance to enumerate on those aspects.
Very, very. We always go to the one of the things that we always talk about capacity building, learning, and exchanging information. I think this is so important. But sometimes, and having worked in several technological environments, you don't have that much time and you have very few resources. So sometimes it's not that you don't want to share the information, it's you don't have the time to prepare the information to be shared to other colleagues, because sometimes you have to reshape it or prepare it to be easily exchanged among colleagues. So that's something that have happened to me, and maybe it's something that we lack of the time, or somehow a resource that could help us is making the communication easier. So Ram, you're an expert in critical infrastructure, which I consider DNS critical infrastructure, and you are the chief strategy officer of a very big company that has infrastructure installed all over the world. That where security is a main issue, because if the DNS doesn't work, most of the activities that we do on the internet won't be possible to perform. So, how do you think that in a developing economy can this critical infrastructure be protected? Which measures should the local people and actions can be taken to protect this national uh, critical infrastructure from cyber attacks?
Thank you, Olga. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. At my company, we have the privilege of serving both developed nations as well as nations that are developing, right? So we run the critical infrastructure of Australia.au. We're the designated service provider, and we're actually designated a critical infrastructure provider for Australia, a developed nation. But we also do this for many other smaller countries, countries in the Caribbean. We do this for Belize. We do this. We're going to be doing this shortly for Anguilla.ai in just a little while. Um, and what you find is that the nature of the threat is not any different. The kinds of threats that developed nations encounter and the kinds of threats that developing nations encounter are no different. The scale and size of the threats are also often not much different. What is different is preparation, people, and policy. Those are the three things that distinguish uh, the responses of a developed nation from a developing one. America already spoke about resources, and you spoke, Olga, about accessibility of information. It's not enough to just have the data on what the threats are and how to respond. Uh, it is important to have it accessible, in the right language, at the right level. You have to calibrate it. But in reality, in my perspective, when the problem actually happens, when you have a nation under attack, a nation's assets, critical assets under attack, when you have the banking system that is crucial, uh, being targeted, when you have telecommunications networks that are in trouble, the very first thing that fails are the systems and the people who are unprepared. And it doesn't matter if you have great resources, great knowledge, great education, but you will find, and this is true even in developed nations, but it's especially true in developing countries, there is no preparation for it. They have read the paper, they have seen the website, they have even had a discussion at the cabinet level on the DDoS attack that had happened, or the fact that you need to secure your routers, right? So they have the theoretical knowledge, but when the attack happens, they've never drilled about it before. So what what you find is that preparation is the crucial difference between a developed nation's response to a cyber attack and a developing nation's response to cyber attack. Um, the second thing is people. Often you will find in developing countries the people who have the knowledge to distinguish whether a problem that is occurring, to distinguish whether that is an attack or merely an error. There are only a few people who know it. And if those people are not available or are on vacation, right? I mean, I can tell you a story in one of the countries that we serve. Um, there was one primary person responsible for cyber defense, and his wife was giving birth. He was in the hospital. The country came under attack, and the systems went down because he had to choose between being there for the baby or being there for the country. And he chose the baby, right? Um, but it's a real life issue, right? So people is the second thing. You just don't have enough resources in that area. The third part is policy. You find in developing nations, um, governments, they look at, say, the UN SDG. They look at the various protocols or capability maturity models. GCSC had a bunch of norms that they developed on safety in cyberspace. They are excellent frameworks, but you need governments to actually take those frameworks and implement policy so that it gets into curriculums, it gets into training systems, it gets into other governmental departments. It becomes a priority for those departments. An example there, if you look at Australia, for instance, several years ago they got really concerned about cyber defense, and the government came up with what they called the Essential Eight. These are 8 essential principles for cyber defense. They include well known things like two factor authentication, etc. But what they did was they implemented policy. They said every government department within 12 months must implement the Essential Eight. And then 2 years later, they said every critical infrastructure provider must certify implementation of the Essential Eight, right? So, really, what you need in developing economies for success here, or for a proper cyber defense strategy, is preparation, people, and policy.
Implement the policy, do the eight things. Very, very interesting. Although I think that also developed companies and countries are also attacked. So that calls my attention, because there are nations and companies that have a lot of resources to have a very secure infrastructure, even though they get under attack. And so developing economies are in a much vulnerable situation. Yes.
And usually there.
So it's preparation is the issue. Okay. So I would like to go to Jose. Would you share with us more of your... perdón. No, ¿nos puedes seguir comentando sobre la... So we go with the forecast made by...
Yes. Well, and the next points I want to say about the cyber defense, and it's just very, very important, is cooperation and level international. In Spanish, say that the all is possible with so sorry, in Spanish and English. Well, no, hablando de ciberseguridad, ciberdefensa y colaboración internacional, sobre todo para nuestros oyentes y colaboradores del espacio latinoamericano, es muy importante transmitir que hay una estructura única que puede unir todo, que es la confianza entre los países, la confianza entre los gobiernos, la confianza para desarrollar políticas de cooperación internacional, ¿no? En toda mi experiencia que he tenido a lo largo de estos años en el trabajo en Latinoamérica, y es algo que estamos empezando a desarrollar también de una forma muy importante en el contexto europeo. Hace tan solo unas semanas el ministro Niinistö ha presentado, el ex primer ministro finlandés Niinistö ha presentado un informe hablando de cooperación y de inteligencia europea única para unir a los 27 países de la Unión Europea. Bien, en ese contexto está muy latente un trabajo conjunto de la OTAN, de la Organización del Tratado del Atlántico Norte, con la Unión Europea, para impulsar una gran cibercoalición precisamente basado en la confianza, para poder trabajar en un único sistema de inteligencia común europeo, ¿no? Aquí tengo algunos colegas del Parlamento Europeo, Lina Gálvez y algunos otros, que han estado trabajando de una forma muy importante la NIS2, que es un entorno cooperativo también, una serie de normas que están marcando el paso a los 27 países, una serie de estándares basados en ciberseguridad que van a ser, sin lugar a dudas, el entorno del futuro, ¿no? Como la Cyber Security Maturity Model Certification, que es muy importante porque implementa sistemas comunes de certificación en todo el contexto de la Unión Europea, precisamente hablando de infraestructuras críticas, ¿no? Para los 27 países. Bueno, en definitiva, no me quiero tampoco extender mucho más. Yo creo que sobre todo pensando en el año que viene, en el año 2025, las principales ciberamenazas van a estar basadas en una mayor sofisticación de los ciberataques, el uso de la inteligencia artificial como arma tanto ofensiva como defensiva, un incremento de los riesgos asociados a la tecnología basado en el Internet de las cosas y sobre todo las cadenas de suministro, y las estrategias de defensa, de ciberdefensa, deben incluir medidas activas de defensa, deben incluir inteligencia predictiva, basada sobre todo en la inteligencia artificial, y una serie de marcos regulatorios sólidos, basados en esa cooperación internacional que citaba, y sobre todo una protección de las infraestructuras físicas críticas, basadas también en nuevas tecnologías. Yo creo que la apuesta de futuro va a ser una realidad en los próximos años y tiene mucho que ver con la computación cuántica. O todos los países toman el testigo de la computación cuántica de una forma seria, precisamente para desarrollar toda la estructura de la inteligencia artificial, o desde luego los malos, por darle alguna denominación, que lo están ya utilizando, pues van a tener mucho más recursos a su alcance, y en esto nos jugamos mucho, no solamente las estructuras de los gobiernos a nivel civil, sino, sin lugar a dudas, todas las Fuerzas Armadas y todas las estructuras también a nivel militar y a nivel de la defensa de todos nuestros países.
Jose, I will try. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So what Jose explained is a very interesting issue. Is that there is a pivotal thing, which is trust among different countries. And he explains that a presentation made by the Minister of el rol del ministro de Finlandia en Europa. Is his personal information by the Ministry of Finland. That Ursula von der Leyen expressed that cooperation, they want to create an intelligence European cooperation agency, something like that. Okay. It's a project based on trust, and there is a joint work with the organization, ¿cómo digo tan en inglés? NATO, with the NATO, sorry, to foster a coalition based on trust to work and a unique way of harnessing all these threats. They think that for next year we expect more sophistication in all the attacks, that the use of artificial intelligence will be not only for defense but also for offensive attacks. There will be also attacks done through Internet of Things, things connected to the Internet in the supply chains using Internet of Things. So all the strategies of cyber defense must use predictive intelligence, artificial intelligence, and also the regulations frameworks must be based in trust, and also the quantum computing must be considered, because this big capacity that the computers will have in the future will have a very big impact in cybersecurity and cyber defense. Countries, dijiste que no solo para los países, but also for the military forces. Okay, thank you very much, Jose. Now I will go to my very Cor? No. Yeah. This person in capacity. How the developing countries diminish this gap that exists in human resources, security, and cyber defense? Just for you to have an idea, in my university we have opened a new career, cyber defense, and we had 1,000 in 1 month. So there's a high demand. People sit. We don't have some that much to cope with that demand. So Wolfgang, what do you think?
That's indeed a difficult question, and it was already mentioned by previous speakers. We have this gap, the skill gap, which is clear. We have the resource gap. And then what Mohammed said, preparation, people, and policy are the differences. So that's a complex problem which you cannot settle, in with one hit. So that means you have a number of different initiatives which form together a stream which will enable the developing countries or the global south to step by step to close the gap. And thirdly, it needs also help from the global north. Help, I would say, quote unquote, in quotation marks, because the best help is if you just, you know, provide resources which enable those countries to find their own way, because otherwise they are just a target from the export of models. And I see here a problem because the whole world agrees capacity building in AI and capacity building in AI in military domain is extremely important. There is no disagreement. But what we have seen in the General Assembly of the United Nations this year, we had two resolutions, one sponsored by the United States and one sponsored by China. And the Chinese resolution in particular is about AI capacity building in third world countries. So, and it got the overwhelming support. The Americans even supported the Chinese resolution, and China supported the US resolution. So that's fine. There is no reason to be against it. But there is a risk in it that just, you know, capacity building organized by China will include the export of the Chinese model. And the capacity building offered by the United States will include the export of the American model. So I think the challenge is in really, and this goes to policy and people. So that means developing countries and the global south has to develop its own strategy and to define exactly what they need. And if they have a list which specify exactly the needs, then they can ask who can help to settle the needs, so that you are not dependent from the big brother or the big sister or the big uncle, but you start from your own needs, and I think this is an important point, and has to guide the strategy, the long-term strategy for the global south. That's why the African Digital Compact is so important, because you know they had their own digital compact, which was in the shadow of the global digital compact in the United Nations. But the African Digital Compact has specified the specific needs of Africa. And what is relevant for the general digital strategy for those countries is also important for the defense sector, for AI, because what Ram has said, you know, there are no, you know, if it comes to attacks, there is no difference whether it's developing countries or developing countries. That's the same. The question is how you react, how you prepare the people, and how you have policy in place, and in particular this preparation aspects, so that you have, you know, not only one person, but you know, a backup for the person. That means is he on vacation, the other one should be in the office. So I think that's a problem. But if it comes to another aspect, which includes also the preparation of the military personnel. So I was in another workshop a couple of months ago, where they discussed, you know, what is the type of the soldier of the future, how to train the soldiers of the future. You know, in the 20th century, you needed strong young men who could, you know, move very fast. But today, you know, if you have a young man who has overweight and is very capable with computer and with the keyboard, he's probably the better soldier. So I think this will, the whole AI revolution in the military field will change also, or is a challenge to understand how to train the soldiers of the future. So the best thing is you do not need them. So that means peace is always better as war. But you have to be prepared. And if you have the wrong soldiers, then you will lose the war in the 21st century.
you. I like this soldier of the future concept. I think it's very interesting to think about. But about this independence that the countries should have about capacity building, there is a big challenge because the technology is developed in few countries. I mean, I would say mainly in two big countries, and all the rest of the world is using that technology. So capacity building comes also based on which technology are we using. I would like to ask Chris. Chris, are you there? Thank you for being with us. It's a pity not to have you here at the IGF. You're an expert in cyber diplomacy, the first cyber diplomat in the world, and international relations. Which are the international and regional debates spaces where developing economies should focus on about what is happening, especially considering that sometimes you don't have the resources to follow all the spaces and to go to all the meetings. Which one would you would say are the most important ones?
Olga, thanks. Good to be with you all. Sorry I can't be there in person. I wish I was, but sadly I'm not. I'd say a couple things. First of all, just that is a real problem. That there's a myriad of different forums, things that people should, particularly developing world countries, global South, should be participating in, not just to gain the knowledge, but also to share their experience, because that's critically important. And just to the point that others have said, when we talk about capacity building, I view that as a foundational element for everything else in cyberspace. If you don't actually have the capability, both the policy capability and the technical capability, you can't really participate either in these forums well, or secure your own systems or respond to attacks. So that really is, I think, the connective point. And for me, when I've seen that, as someone, as it was also noted, Ram noted this, you need a number of different factors, including the political will in the country too, not just the technical people saying they want the training, but also the political commitment that this is a real priority for them. And that's becoming more real, but that's been hard. And that's why, for the Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, for instance, the one of the groups that I do a lot of work with and have for years, which is a capacity building platform that has 60 countries, a couple dozen companies, civil society, and academia. We move very much to a demand-driven approach, as was said, that ask the global South what do they want, rather than saying here's what you get, and that's a much more sustainable model. But in terms of the forums that you mentioned, there is obviously the UN, the open-ended working group in particular, which is dealing with cyber. I'd say that when that first met, the first one of those, and now about 8 years ago, I was struck by the number of developing world countries who came and said, look, we'd love to debate things like norms and these esoteric concepts, but what we really need is help. We need help with our own capacity. We need help in building our institutions and our technical capabilities. So that's a critical one. I'd say there's some good news story, Olga, on that, and trying to get more Global South participation, particularly a Women in Cyber program that's been administered by GFC, but many countries behind it. And there's been lots of women from the developing world have been going to and participating and making interventions in that session. So that's important. There's been training that UNODA has done for cyber diplomats, especially in developing world countries. And of course, there's a number of others, Diplo and others have done that. And that's important. Coming up this year is the WSIS Plus 20, which will be a big deal, I think. It was hard to believe that we're already at plus 20. I remember plus 10. But that's an important one, I think, for developing world countries to be at. The GFC, our platform, we have 220 members and partners. We have what's important is we've created regional hubs to allow these countries to more easily interact, including in the Pacific Islands, ASEAN, the Americas region with OAS, African Union, and the Baltics. So that gives that in that some way these institutions are trying to come to the community. The ITU, I think, is important, more on the technical side. First, for first responders and certs, the Council of Europe and the UNODC for cybercrime issues. And so, as you noted, the problem is there's so many different forums that these folks could attend. You need the right people to attend. You can't just have your representative in New York, for instance, in the UN, go to all these meetings unless they have expertise. And you need the ability to attend them. And even for big countries, trying to attend all these meetings, these plethora of these meetings is hard. For small countries where it's one person, and I'll give an example, a Pacific Island country, wonderful person from Fiji who is both doing their cybersecurity there, but she's also traveling to New York and these other forums to try to participate. It's very difficult on them to be able to split that time. And so we need to figure out how we can more constructively engage with the developing world and allow them to be part of these forums because it's critically important. And obviously, the IGF is another forum as well. So that's a real challenge because we can't simply have the developing world at one level and the rest of the world at another level. We need to make sure, for practical reasons too, even for the developing world's standpoint, they need a lot of countries to work with them to be able to go after cyber threats, which are often routed through these countries if they don't have strong laws or capabilities.
Thank you, Chris. And the good thing is that now most of the events are hybrid and many things kept recorded. I know it's not the same. It's lovely to be here and interact with people, share a coffee, share a sandwich. But if you want to do a research or you want to know about something, you can find more information online, and luckily in several languages, which language is also a big barrier, at least for Latin America, is a big barrier. Not everyone, ya sabemos, no? Not everyone speaks English in order to understand foreign speakers or read clearly the documents. And now I would like to go to my dear friend Philip Grabense. Philip is a defense counselor and an expert also in DNS structure, which is a critical infrastructure, because he was former chairman of Affiliates, who was a company. Now it's merged with another company, but it's a global company that manages DNS infrastructure. Philip, how do you think developing economies can find guidance or reference in order to update refine their legal frameworks for fight against cybercrime? Raul mentioned as an important thing the regulations and policy. So how can that be really considered and being up to date? So the agility in the development of these regulations. And welcome. And it's a pity that we don't have you here, but we are seeing you online.
Thanks for having me. And this is a tough question to answer in the remaining 2, 3, 4 minutes I have. But let me try to summarize that a little bit and make a few points regarding that. So far, we have basically talked about crimes against computer systems, but another big part is of cybercrime and fighting cyber crimes is the content-related crimes. And let me and I think we cannot learn too much, or of course we can learn, but we can also learn from the mistakes which has been made within legal frameworks, because every time something horrible happens, and I will give you an example for that, the society and the people are calling for new laws and new tools for enforcement agencies and increasing of laws. And a lot of times this crying and asking for new laws has very negative side effects. And I think the problems are really somewhere else, or a lot of the problems are somewhere else. And I think in the discussion we had, it has become very clear that the problems are not so much the laws or the framework or technology, but it's really that people are unprepared, or the problems are what Mareka calls the skills gap you have. And as much as you have the skills gap in people in the technology field, you have also the skills gap or people unprepared in law enforcement. And so it's not really the technology, it's not so much a framework, it's really about the skill set missing and the preparation of the people. So the example I'm giving you here, it's an example of horrible cases of possession of child sexual abuse material in Germany. So there were horrible cases in the news, big outrage in society, and laws were increased and new laws were passed, and reform of the German criminal law, which in the end led to unintended consequences for teenage sexual expression through the digital media, because certainly all kind of, exchange of information and exchange of pictures from teenagers, on media was suddenly criminalized and a crime. So that was a really negative side effect, of that calling for new regulations. And the real problem was, why was law enforcement not effective before? Against, or why is law enforcement, or where's the weaknesses still in law enforcement to fight against, this horrible crimes? The problem is you're lacking well-trained and the capacity of well-trained people in law enforcement. That was really the problem. This problem has not been solved by increasing fines or introducing new paragraphs, making certain behavior or criminalizing certain behavior. It is the same. What counts? What Rom said, what Maranga said. It's really the capacity of the people, the capacity building, the training of the people, the skills gap. In the specific example of sexual abuse material, we were just lacking in Germany. We were lacking the police enforcement officers who were prepared to the exposure of traumatic material, who had the psychological training to deal with that. We had not enough people to do it, and not prepared people to go through the internet and look at this content. So that's why, and still it's a problem. So what you need is really also here, of course, frameworks help, and also you can have then framework for capacity building. But it's not so much the frameworks, and it's not so much the laws. It's really about, it comes down. So, still it comes down to the people. Of course, artificial intelligence helps you to, go through the internet and identify, potential, crimes there. But in the end, it has to be people who look at it and bring it to prosecution. And that what really, what really helps protect the victims of those horrible crimes. So I can only echo what my colleague says, also in regard to content-related crimes and enabled and related crimes. It's same as it counts as what it counts for crimes against computer system itself.
It's not only having the policy, is making it work, making it relevant, because if not, how to make it relevant. So we have 5 minutes. Is anyone in the audience who would like to add something or make any comment? Or we make a final 1 minute per speaker, and we have to leave the room. I will start with Rom, who's looking at me directly.
Thank you, Olga. This is a really terrific set of comments that have come through from everybody. What strikes me as a useful next step um, is to think about collating the information that has happened in a session like this, um, and to go back and look at developing countries, at least those who you know, who we know, and check whether this will actually work. You see what GFCE is doing. When Chris was talking about what GFCE is doing, they already have a framework. They already have material that is available. And I think that we ought to look at what's already done, not reinvent the wheel in building cyber defense. Effective cyber defense is not new cyber defense. Effective cyber defense is cyber defense that has already worked, and more importantly, defense that has already failed and therefore been patched, right? So there is that, I think, is kind of the way to look at it. Let's be practical. Let's take small steps, because the large steps will overwhelm developing economies.
Thank you. Wolfgang?
It's not a theoretical question, it's a very practical question. It's just implementation. You have to do it.
Thank you. Well, I say for the three pillars and the people, policies, and preparation. It's very, very important. Three pillars is necessary to all countries. and this is not a future. It's a present. It's necessary now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Marike, your final comments?
Yes, Chris had mentioned first, and I have the privilege of helping a developing nation set up their national CSIRT. I think that is critical, and there are many, many guidelines that exist that also talk about the legal constructs and the regulatory frameworks that countries should have within their own culture, within their own legal systems, to build up this national CSIRT that I think will greatly help developing nations.
Thank you very much. Chris, your last comments?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what we were saying before. This is a critically important area. You need the political will in countries. You need sustainability and continuity, which is always difficult, and you need non-duplication. And I think as we try to match resources with the needs, and the needs are great, there are a number, and I totally agree. Don't recreate the wheel. There's lots of stuff out there. It's an important area. The Sybil portal that the GFC runs has hundreds of projects, calendars, things that I think they're helpful, and it's publicly available. It's not limited just to the members of the GFC. It's been linked to the UNIDIR cyber policy portal at the UN portal, and so that's, I think, a really good cross-linking resource. And the last thing I just say is, on the topic of things that are out there, I also am on the board of a nonprofit called the Center for Internet Security, which, like the Essential Aid, has the 10 essential controls. So a lot on cyber hygiene is available. So I agree, collating what's there rather than recreating things is critical.
Thank you. Philip, your last comment.
I think I can just really echo the last four comments. It's, I think we all came in the end to the same opinions. Implementing, not just the same thing. Not recreating the wheel means also not always making new laws, enforce. Not recreating the wheels means in law enforcement, just enforcing existing laws and building capacity for people to enforce those laws. That's the way to go forward. And also, because existing laws have always shown that they've gone to the critical test of how they relate to human rights and constitutional rights. So always creating new laws, always puts a lot of danger, talking as a defense counsel, puts a lot of danger, because then those laws has to be looked at, from all kind of perspective, and a lot of things go wrong when new laws being passed, especially in a hurry. So not recreate the wheel, not just do new words, implementation and enforcement of existing tools and laws. I think that's the way to go ahead.
Okay, please help me applauding our dear friends and colleagues for a very interesting session. And for the remotes, don't go away. We will take a picture. Don't go away. We take a picture with you and the screen. No, thanks to you. ¿Me sacaste una foto? Yes. Quiero que se vean ellos. Aquí en el medio, ¿no? Sí.
All right. Thank you. Thanks. Have a great day and see you wherever, maybe next year.